Friday, July 10th, 1942. Dear Kitty, I expect I have thoroughly bored you with my long-winded descriptions of our dwelling, but still I think you should know where we've landed. But to continue my story, you see, I've not finished yet. When we arrived at the printer got wrecked, Maeve took us quickly upstairs into the secret annex. She closed the door behind us, and we were alone. Margot was already waiting for us, having come much faster on her bicycle. Our living room and all other rooms were chock full of rubbish, indescribably so. All the cardboard boxes which had been sent to the office in the previous months lay piled on the floor and the beds. The little room was filled to the ceiling with bedclothes. We had to start cleaning up immediately, if we wished to sleep in decent beds at night. Mummy and Margot were not in a fit state to take part. They were tired and lay down on their beds. They were miserable, and lots more besides. But the two clearers up of the family, Daddy and myself, wanted to start at once. The whole day long we unpacked boxes, filled cupboards, hammered and tidied up until we were dead beat. We sank into clean beds at night. We hadn't had a bit of anything warm the whole day, but we didn't care. Mummy and Margot were too tired and keyed up to eat, and Daddy and I were too busy. On Tuesday morning we went on where we left off the day before. Ellie and Meep collected our rations for us. Daddy improved the poor blackout. We scrubbed the kitchen floor and were on the go the whole day long again. I hardly had time to think about the great change in my life until Wednesday. Then I had a chance, for the first time since our arrival, to tell you all about it, and at the same time to realize myself what had actually happened to me and what was still going to happen. Yours, Anne. Saturday, July 11th, 1942. Dear Kitty, Daddy, Mummy, and Margot can't get used to the sound of the Westertoren clock yet, which tells us the time every quarter of an hour. I can. I loved it from the start, and especially in the night. It's like a faithful friend. I expect you will be interested to hear what it feels like to disappear. Well, all I can say is that I don't know myself yet. I don't think I should ever feel really at home in this house, but that does not mean that I loathe it here. It's more like being on vacation in a very peculiar boarding house. Rather a mad idea, perhaps, but that is how it strikes me. The secret annex is an ideal hiding place. Although it leans to one side and is damp, you never find such a comfortable hiding place anywhere in Amsterdam. No, perhaps not even the whole of Holland. Our little room looked very bare at first with nothing on the walls, but thanks to Daddy who bought my film star collection and picture postcards on beforehand, and with the aid of a paste pot and brush, I had transformed the walls into one gigantic picture. This makes it look much more cheerful, and when the Van Dans come, we'll get some wood from the attic and make a few little cupboards for the walls and other odds and ends to make it look more lively. Margot and Mummy are a little better now. Mummy felt well enough to cook some soup for the first time yesterday, but then forgot all about it while she was downstairs talking, so the peas were burned to a cinder and utterly refused to leave the pan. Mr. Cuvius had bought me a book called Young People's Annual. The four of us went to the private office yesterday evening and turned on the radio. I was so terribly frightened that someone might hear it that I simply begged Daddy to come upstairs with me. Mummy understood how I felt and came too. We are very nervous in other ways too, that the neighbors might hear us or see something going on. We made curtains straight away on the first day. Really, one can hardly call them curtains. They are just light, loose strips of material, all different shapes, quality, and pattern, which Daddy and I sewed together in a most unprofessional way. These works of art are fixed in a position with drawing pins not to come down until we emerge from here. There are some large business premises on the right of us and on the left a furniture workshop. There is no one there after working hours, but even so, sounds could travel through the walls. We have forbidden Margot to cough at night, although she has a bad cold, and make her swallow large doses of codeine. I am looking for Tuesday when the Van Dans arrive. It will be much more fun and not so quiet. It is the silence that frightens me so in the evenings and at night. I wish, like anything, that one of our protectors could sleep here at night. I can't tell you how oppressive it is near to be able to go outdoors. Also, I'm very afraid that we shall be discovered and be shot. That is not exactly a pleasant prospect. We have to whisper and tread lightly during the day, otherwise the people in the warehouse might hear us. Someone is calling me. Yours, Anne. Friday, August 14, 1942. Dear Kitty, I have deserted you for a whole month, but honestly, there is so little news here that I can't find amusing things to tell you every day. The Van Dams arrived on July 13th. We thought they were coming on the 14th, but between the 13th and the 16th of July, the Germans called up more people right and left, which created more and more unrest. So they played for safety, better a day too early than a day too late. At 9:30 in the morning we were still having breakfast. Peter arrived, the Van Dam's son, not 16 yet, a rather soft, shy, gawky youth. Can't expect much from his company. He brought his cat, Mouschi, with him. Mr. and Mrs. Van Dam arrived half an hour later, and to our great amusement she had a large potty in her hat box. I don't feel at home anywhere without my chamber, she declared, so it was the first thing to find its permanent resting place under her divan. Mr. Van Dam did not bring his, but carried a folding tea-table under his arm. From the day they arrived we all had meals cosily together, and after 3 days it was just as if we were one large family. Naturally the Van Dams were able to tell us a lot about the extra week they had spent in the inhabited world. Among other things, they were very interested to hear what had happened to our house and to Mr. Goudsmit. Mr. Van Dam told us. Mr. Goudsmit phoned at 9 o'clock on Monday morning and asked if I could come around. I went immediately and found G in a state of great agitation. He let me read a letter that the Franks had left behind, and wanted to take the cat to the neighbors as indicated in the letter, which pleased me. Mr. G was afraid that the house would be searched, so we went through all the rooms, tidied up a bit, and cleared away the breakfast things. Suddenly I discovered a writing pad on Mrs. Frank's desk with an address in Maastricht written on it. Although I knew this was done on purpose, I pretended to be very surprised and shocked and urged Mr. G to tear up this unfortunate little piece of paper without delay. I went on pretending that I knew nothing of your disappearance all the time, but after seeing the paper I got a brainwave. Mr. Goudsmit, I said, it suddenly dawns on me what this address may refer to. Now it all comes back to me. A high-ranking officer was in the office about 6 months ago. He appeared to be very friendly with Mr. Frank, and offered to help him, should the need arise. He was stationed in Maastricht. I think he must have kept his word, and somehow or other managed to get them into Belgium, and then on to Switzerland. I should tell this to any friends who may inquire. Don't, of course, mention Maastricht. With these words I left the house. Most of your friends know already, because I've been told myself several times by different people. We were highly amused at the story, and when Mr. Van Dam gave us further details, laughed still more at the way people can let their imagination run away with them. One family had seen the pair of us pass on bicycles very early in the morning, and another lady knew quite differently that we were fetched by a military car in the middle of the night. Yours, Anne. Friday, August 21st, 1942. Dear Kitty, the entrance to our hiding place has now been properly concealed. Mr. Keller thought it would be better to put a cupboard in front of our door, because a lot of houses are being searched for hidden bicycles. But of course, it had to be a movable cover that can open like a door. Mr. Vossen made the whole thing. We had already let him into the secret, and he can't do enough to help. If we want to go downstairs, we have to first bend down and then jump, because the step has gone. The first 3 days we were all going about with masses of lumps on our foreheads, because we all knocked ourselves against the low doorway. Now we have nailed a cloth build with wood wool against the top of the door. Let's see if that helps. I'm not working much at present. I'm giving myself holidays until September. Then Daddy is going to give me lessons. It's shocking how much I've forgotten already. There is little change in our life here. Mr. Van Dam and I usually manage to upset each other. It's just the opposite with Margot, whom he likes very much. Mummy sometimes treats me just like a baby, which I can't bear. Otherwise, things are going better. I still don't like Peter anymore. He is so boring. He flops lazily on his bed half the time, does a bit of carpentry, and then goes back for another snooze. What a fool. It is lovely weather, and in spite of everything we make the most we can of it by lying on a camp bed in the attic where the sun shines through an open window. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, September 2nd, 1942. Dear Kitty, Mr. and Mrs. Van Dam had a terrific quarrel. I've never seen anything like it before. Mummy and Daddy would never dream of shouting at each other. The cause was so trivial that the whole thing was a pure waste of breath. But still, everyone to his own liking. Naturally, it is very unpleasant for Peter, who has to stand by. No one takes him seriously. He is so frightfully touchy and lazy. Yesterday he was badly upset because he found that his tongue was blue instead of red. This unusual phenomenon of nature disappeared just as quickly as it had come. Today he was going about with a scarf on. as he had a stiff neck. In addition, Milord complains of lumbago. Pains around the heart, kidneys, and lungs are not unusual either. He is a real hypochondria. That's the word for such people, isn't it? It's not all honey between Mummy and Mrs. Van Daan. There is plenty of cause for unpleasantness. To give a small example, I will tell you that Mrs. Van Daan has taken all 3 of her sheets out of the common linen cupboard. She takes it for granted that Mummy's sheets will do for all of us. It will be a nasty surprise for her when she finds that Mummy has followed her good example. Also, she was thoroughly piqued that her dinner service and not ours is in use. She is always trying to find out where we have actually put our plates. They are closer than she thinks. They are in a cardboard box behind a lot of junk in the attic. Our plates are ungettable, and as long as we are here, and a good thing too. I always have bad luck. I smashed one of Mrs. Van Daan's soup plates into 1,000 pieces yesterday. Oh, she cried angrily. Couldn't you be careful for once? That's the last one I've got. Mr. Van Daan is all sugar to me nowadays. Long may it last. Mummy gave me another frightful servant this morning. I can't bear them. Our ideas are completely opposite. Daddy is a darling, although he can sometimes be angry with me for 5 minutes on end. Last week we had a little interruption in our monotonous life. It was over a book about women, and Peter. First, I must tell you that Margot and Peter are allowed to read nearly all the books that Mr. Cuvius lends us, but the grown-ups held back this particular book on the subject of women. Peter's curiosity was aroused at once. What was it the 2 of them were not allowed to read in this book? He got hold of the book on the sly, while his mother was downstairs talking, and disappeared with his booty to the attic. All went well for a few days. His mother knew what he was doing, but didn't tell tales until Father found out. He was very angry, took the book away, and thought that would finish the whole business. However, he had not allowed for his son's curiosity, which waxed rather than waned because of his father's attitude. Peter determined to finish it, thought of a way to get hold of the enthralling book. In the meantime, Mrs. Van Daan had asked me what she thought about it all. Mummy thought this particular book was not suitable for Margot, but she saw no harm in letting her read most books. There is a great difference, Mrs. Van Daan, said Mummy, between Margot and Peter. In the first place, Margot is a girl, and girls are always more grown-up than boys. Secondly, Margot has read quite a lot of serious books and does not go in search of things that are forbidden her. And thirdly, Margot is far more developed and intelligent, shown by the fact of her being in the 4th form at school. Mrs. Van Daan agreed, but still thought it was wrong in principle to let children read books which were written for grown-ups. In the meantime, Peter had found a time of the day when no one bothered him or the book, 7:30 in the evening, when everyone was in the private office listening to the radio. That was when he took his treasure to the attic again. He should have been downstairs again by 8:30, but because the book was so thrilling, he forgot the time and was just coming downstairs as his father came into the room. You can imagine the consequences. With a slap and a snatch, the book lay on the table, and Peter was an addict. That's how matters stood as we sat down to the table. Peter stayed upstairs, no one bothered about him, and he had to go to bed without any supper. We went on with the meal, chattering gaily, when suddenly we heard a piercing whistle. We all stopped eating and looked with pale, changed faces from one to another. Then we heard Peter's voice calling down from the chimney. I say, I'm not coming down anyway. Mr. Van Daan sprang to his feet, his napkin fell to the floor, and scarlet in the face he shouted, I've had enough of this! Daddy took his arm, afraid of what might happen, and the 2 men went together to the attic. After a good deal of resistance and stamping, Peter landed up in his room with the door closed, and we went on eating. Mrs. Van Daan wanted to save one slice of bread for the dear boy, but his father stood firm. If he doesn't apologize soon, he will have to sleep in the attic. Loud protests from the rest of us, as we thought missing supper was quite enough punishment. Besides, Peter might catch a cold, and we couldn't call a doctor. Peter did not apologize. He was already in the attic. Mr. Van Daan knew nothing more about it, but I noticed the next morning that Peter's bed had been slept in. Peter was back in the attic at 7 o'clock, but Daddy managed with a few friendly words to persuade him to come down again. Sour faces and obstinate silence for 3 days, and then everything went smoothly once more.